correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Hello.
And we're going to talk some RPGs. But before we get into that, we have a supplement and a podcast to talk about.
Yeah, well, we figured we'd do things a little different, but because, well, Hooley runs the Forge and is part of the D20 Radio Network, and he's an honorary Steve, and we've had him on the show a whole bunch of times, we figured we'd shout out the Forge this week because, well, they haven't released a new episode in a while, but Hooley finally finished up
a book.
Yes, he released a book, which probably is significantly more work than a podcast episode.
One would hope.
They have released what they call the Forge Collection Encounter Zones, which is a supplement that is all about kind of breaking down the abstract movement and range band system of Genesis and to a certain point Star Wars as well into maybe a little more concrete,
solid, reasonable terms. Yeah. We've been kind of behind the scenes on this for a minute now, and I like it. I think it's a really cool concept. I think it's something that certain Genesis books really, or certain Genesis settings really needed.
Mm-hmm.
As with everything in Genesis, it's such a use it if you feel like you need it type thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But it's got some neat stuff, and I think some of like the stuff that Brett was doing with Anarchy and Dragon City kind of tied into it, specifically some with like the some of his net running rules and stuff, I think kind of tied into this kind of concept of zone movement. But it really does kind of, if the abstract movement and stuff is something you struggle with, this could certainly help you out. It's on drive-through. It's part of the Foundry. It's all of $5. So yeah, if Genesis is your thing and you feel like you could use some help with the movement, or your players could use some help with the movement, grab it and see if it'll help you.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you're supporting a really cool creator and a good dude.
Yep.
So
yep. Hooley's good, and he's an honorary Steve.
Yep. But I'm glad to see it on, digital bookshelves finally.
Yes, and we can tell you from personal experience, he's been working on this for a long time.
Yeah. So many. Well, and the bad part is Hooley's over there in Australia, and we're over here in the United States, and so many late nights of, hey, how does this look? And it's like 3:00 in the morning, and I'm staring at a PDF like, I don't know, man. I got to look at that in the morning. Like, I don't know. It's too early right now. You're like
too
getting
early,
up for
too
work.
Late, something like that. Yeah.
There was a couple times where you're like getting up for work. Like, I don't know. I'll look at it at lunch. Like,
yeah.
But you had a topic for tonight, and I think it's pretty apt because now that we're through the end of the year and we're through the holidays, I feel myself a little bit more refreshed. But you were talking about you wanted to get into burnout.
Well, not so much burnout is getting stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
Now, I'll be the first to say that probably half of the advice I need to follow to do this is crap that I've already said on this show. But I'm not going back to listen to 150 some episodes of my own voice.
Is that not wild? Is that not crazy that we are like 150 some episodes into this?
Yeah, no kidding.
We have
really
spewed so much information out into the ether, and neither of us listen to it. Neither of us take our own advice.
You know what, though? It's a whole lot easier to say good advice than to practice good advice.
It is. So I think it depends on... So for me, just to start things off, when it comes to burnout, it depends on what I'm feeling burnout about. So if I'm burnout on, like, if I get stuck in a rut where it's like, man, I play these 2 games weekly. I'm always playing on Monday nights. I'm always playing on Friday nights. I'm so tired of these same 2 games over and over and over and over again. And it's not a fault against anybody other than like me just being tired of repetition. The first thing that I start looking for is there a way for me to either add another game that breaks up some of the monotony, or can I step away from one of these games or both of these games and just get the breath away that I need? Adding a third game isn't always feasible, right? Just realistically, I think for me, a lot of the time, the rut comes from playing the same games over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of like Monday's Genesis, Friday's D&D, Monday's Genesis, Friday's D&D. So if I had the ability to add a third game, maybe I'll play like a rotating one-shot type, just to break up that constantly playing the same two games over and over again. And again, this comes from somebody who's like, I'm just not a brand loyalty person. You know what I mean? Like,
You're system promiscuous, in the words of
yes.
Shane Stacks.
Yes. And so maybe that's a conversation to have. You know, hey, I'm feeling a little bit burnt out. I'm in a bit of a rut. Can we change this up? You know, can somebody take over for a little bit? I need to step away. Like, just that little bit of change up sometimes can be enough. And sometimes it takes big shakeups. I don't know. How do you feel like, you know, what's your opinion? What are you feeling like would help you get out of a rut?
Well, see, for me, it's not a rut like you're talking about there. I think what you're talking about there, what you've described, is probably the best way for me to bust out of a rut like that. Find a game that is just different, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or step away from one of the ones that I'm too complacent in.
Right.
My rut is more as a GM. I've had a couple campaigns that just got bit by, well, in some respects, insufficient planning on my part, and just also scheduling snafus
Nonsense.
that were the fault of no one.
Yeah.
You know, just like the perfect storm of crap.
It's hard to get over that scheduling nonsense. And I realized the other day that, and this was about the time we were talking to JT, me and you were incredibly privileged in a lot of ways, in that on any given day, I could throw up a message in the Discord and be like, hey, anybody around want to play this game right now? And I would bet I could get at least 3 players.
Good chance, yeah.
You know, yeah. Not saying out of specificity, but just in general.
Yeah, we get interest at least.
Yes. Whereas, like, your average Joe Schmo, you know, maybe you, the listener, not to call you Joe Schmo, but you, the listener, would be like, oh man, I need to find people to play this game. So now you got to reach out. You either got to go on a Discord somewhere like our lovely Discord, the Me and Steve Talk RPGs Discord, or you got to go to like the Genesis Discord or the blah 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 Discord, your local game shop Discord, or, you know, even go into a local game store and trying to drum up interest.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder. It was harder back in the day to find a game that wasn't something either that you didn't want to play or something that worked better with your schedule.
Yeah, with the internet, that has made that a bit easier.
Yeah, and we're both getting more used to playing online.
Yeah. No, for me, it's just like so things happen, right? That I probably shouldn't let discourage me, or whatever the appropriate term is.
Before you go off on that, I do want to address your other point that you've made about you feeling like you're not prepared enough, or you feeling that you didn't do enough preparation. That can be true, and that can happen. I find myself really pushing to not let me get bothered by that. If session 1 we come out swinging and I feel like, oh man, I did not do enough prep for this game, great. That just means I got to push a little bit harder for session 2, and I got to make it a little bit better. And I know that's not always the feasible option, like life and time and everything, but I see, this is why I don't do a ton of prep before starting a game. I get my basic ideas and I get a really healthy understanding of the core system. And then I go from there and I build off that. And if it does require me to do a little bit more research or reading, I'll be like, okay, put a pin in that, make a note of it. I need to read up on this. I need to look into that. Because years and years and years of learning the hard way of like, man, back in the AD&D days, I focused on stuff that did not matter. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take over this episode and talk.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Back in the AD&D days, there was all this information. I found my old notebooks the other day and was laughing and laughing and laughing because I found notebooks from before I even ran games of me taking notes, thinking what it took to be a game master, right? Like what it took to be a dungeon master before I was one. And I had notes on like, I've talked about this in the past. Back in AD&D, different crystals interacted differently depending on what you were doing. So if you had like amethyst, it wouldn't let you get drunk. Like if you had it on your person, you could not physically get drunk. It was like drunk or poisoned, which makes sense. And it was just a whole bunch of them. And I was like, oh man, what if my players collect these crystals? That never mattered. That never once came up in a game. I have all that knowledge stored away in books somewhere that I took notes of. It never was the important part. The important part was, oh man, I hope my players can read. And it's not me being rude against anybody that has difficulties reading. That is me literally saying these like grown adults should be able to read a piece of paper with a handful of numbers on it. Like,
fair.
And that's 90% of the like struggle is like, okay, what do my players understand of the system? If they have a greater understanding of the system than I do, that's great because then I can go to them and be like, well, how does this, I have this here. I want to try and do this. I read it and interpreted it this way. How do you feel like this works this way? That's why I love having a rules lawyer at my table because I can sit and look at them and be like, hey, what is the rule on this? Because I don't genuinely know. And they'll go, blah, 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 blah. Oh, cool. Awesome. So then we'll implement it or we'll not. Like, if I think that's dumb, I'll be like, oh, well, that's dumb. I'm not using that. Like, and I think that's where I make where my strength lies is in just understand it. It's a strength and it's a weakness. I do very minimal prep, but I do, like I said, I like to understand the systems that I'm playing in pretty well before I start playing them. So for example, like I'm working on this Night's Black Agents game. It's Gumshoe, but it's its own form of Gumshoe. So I've been reading like system documents a couple times over to try and get an idea of, oh, well, this has changed between other systems I played, or this has changed between this, or this has changed, and taking notes like that to help myself understand that better. But like as far as story beats and story is concerned, and I know you've beat yourself up for a long time about your Cyberpunk game. I think you had a really good Cyberpunk game going, and I think that game just collapsed under COVID. And the fact of the matter is if you asked anybody at that table, other than one person who just was not jiving with it, everybody was having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the frustration from a GM side where you're like, man, this isn't the story I wanted to tell. I want to get you guys back to where I wanted to be. I get that. At the same time, we've grown and learned a lot in this intervening years. And I think you would agree, it's when it comes to story, it's not about location. It's just about telling it.
Right. Now,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think my frustration, a lot of it. So here's kind of what happens to me. I'm great for coming up with high-level campaign concepts. Mm-hmm. I've got an army of high-level campaign ideas. But one of two things seems to happen, or a couple of two things seems to happen. One of a few things seems to happen. There, I'll get my relative comparatives connected somehow. So I will get a high-level concept, and then I will see someone else use it and go, oh. Like, so here's one, and this is going back to long before we started the podcast. I had this idea for a fantasy campaign where the core of it, the start of it was the party is helping this priest, whatever, cleric, something of a deity.
Right.
Well, unbeknownst to them and to the priest, whatever, they're being hoodwinked by an evil deity masquerading as this other deity.
Right.
And so
that's a cool concept.
Well, yeah, until Matt Mercer stole
it. See, okay.
Except he didn't steal it because I had never told anybody.
I know. That's that parallel thinking stuff. See, my thing with that though is I have a lot of faith, and I know it's hard. I understand it's hard because I've done it too, where you look and you go, oh man, they did that, but they did that better. Well, that's true with a lot of this hobby. If you think about what we draw inspiration from, we do that a lot. When I steal, when we're building campaigns, we beg, borrow, and steal, right? Like
Right.
books and movies and TV. I could never make a movie near the quality that Star Wars is, but I could absolutely tell some of the Star Wars stories better than they get told. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and so there's no reason to get discouraged when someone like Matt Mercer uses the idea that you had basically, but does it in a different way. Yeah, they may have done it and executed in a more highly produced, and yeah, he is very much a professional voice actor, and so it is better voiced. But letting that discourage you does you a great disservice, because maybe you had some different twist worked up in your head, or you might have done X, Y, and Z differently. Well, that's enough at a table playing with a group of players to justify the difference, and not being afraid, just not being afraid to just go ahead and go for it, and being like, I understand that this may seem familiar, but I've been wanting to tell a story like this for a while, and I want to tell my version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not like always the answer you want to hear, but the fact of the matter is that when I look at GMing or DMing or whatever you want to call it, I look at it as telling my version of a story.
No.
I look at it as going, I want to tell you the story that I want to tell, and I want you to participate in that. Like I keep saying that, I want to tell the story that I want to tell. That's not saying this isn't collaborative. That's not saying that I don't let my players dictate where that story goes or how that changes and how that can be organically changing. But I digress.
No, I think you're exactly right, in all honesty, and I think it's one of those things, and I think a lot of GM advice is this way. It's easy to see it when someone points it out. It's much harder to convince yourself to follow it.
Oh yeah. No, we literally started this episode out by saying there's so much advice that we've given out on this podcast that we ourselves have not listened to one iota.
No. Yeah,
And it's the truth. It is so easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, well, you just fix that with X, Y, and Z. But the fact of the matter is if it happens to me, I go, what the hell is going on? I don't know how to fix this.
Yeah. It's so much easier to give the hypothetical advice than to apply it in situ.
I agree. I definitely I feel like this is something that, and I'm not trying to say this to sound like, oh, well, I'm not a better GM than anybody. I'm just a GM. That particular thing has been something that I struggled with a long time ago, and I finally just got over myself. I was just finally like, screw it. I can't be bothered by this no more. I just have to do it, and I just gonna have to get over it. And I would sit, and the first time I did it, I stressed the entire time. I was like, oh man, they're gonna find out. They're gonna be like, hey, didn't Simpsons do this? Like, no. Like, pushing past that mental block and just being like, no, I'm going to take this. I'm going to rock it. I'm going to own it. It's going to be my thing, is something that just takes a little bit of mental doing and a little bit of push.
No, and also, I should know, just from the number of strange looks I've gotten in conversations over the years, that the connections I make in my brain between things do not come to everyone else. Like, you and I seem to actually follow each other's brainwaves fairly well, but I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're talking about something with someone, and you go off down this rabbit trail, and you're like,
they
wait
have
a minute,
no idea where you made
how did we get there?
Yeah, I've been in that conversation where they have no clue how you made the left, and I think it's a feature of ADHD where other people that have like your particular brand of it can dial in and understand where the left turn was made. Meanwhile, people that don't have that particular brand are like, how did we get to this cornfield? And it's like, well, you didn't notice the signs back there that said,
Well, okay, slight divergent, but I was on another Discord forum talking about guitar stuff. We were talking about inlay dots on a fretboard.
Mm-hmm.
We got from there to grumbling about cars in like 3 posts.
That doesn't shock me. That's not too far off.
But, and then we stopped and looked and went back and went, oh, okay, that's how we did it.
Wait, let's hit the brakes and turn around.
No,
but I get that. I get it. Go ahead.
That's one thing that happens to me is I see enough of my idea in something someone else has done that I go, well, man, I don't want to use that, at least not now. The other thing that seems to happen fairly often is I get an idea for something in a given system.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else goes, hey, I've got an idea to play this. And it's the system that I had an idea for. And I'm like, well, if they're going to run that, then I want to do something else. And I think that's me just not wanting to be repetitive. And it's not a right-wrong thing, but it still just bugs me about myself.
Not to go down to like a psychological rabbit hole, but it's kind of the same problem in a way. It's the same. I think you're hitting the same mental hiccup of you're going, oh, but they'll probably do it better than I can, or oh, well, if they want to do it, then maybe I shouldn't do that. And I don't know. Critics be damned. Just do what you want to do.
No, you've got a point. I hadn't thought it, but it is, in a sense, it's the I don't want to repeat somebody problem.
Yep.
It's completely different faces of it, but it's still the same thing at its core.
Well, let me put it this way. Between me, you, and Ben, right? Ben being our current GM.
Mm-hmm.
I run Genesis differently than you run Genesis. Ben runs Genesis differently than the both of us.
Mm-hmm.
We put different emphasis, all three of us put different emphasis on different parts of that system. So if I have a Savage Worlds game, and you have a Savage Worlds game, and Ben has a Savage Worlds game, do you think we're going to run the same game?
No.
So that's where you sort of have to push yourself and be like, wait a minute, just because I built this out and they're going to run it doesn't mean I can't still run that. And maybe you can't run it congruently. Maybe we can't have two Savage Worlds games going at the same time. That's a little confusing. But we can finish one up and then follow up with another one.
True.
Or what I'm using Savage Worlds as an example, but whatever system. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter. It could be 2D20 by Modifius. It could be, WEG Star Wars. It doesn't matter. It's the same concept. You just have to sort of go, well, I do things differently than everybody else does them. And so I'm going to run it my way. And I'm going to enjoy the way that this person run it. And maybe you take some, lessons or tricks that they do or things that they do that you liked about it and incorporate it in the way you do it. Maybe they don't do anything the way you like it. Okay, great. So you don't take anything away from that game. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's true. I know another one of my issues.
We'll just call this episode Mental Splinters.
is so I get high level ideas constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a Google Doc somewhere full of them. Some of them get partially fleshed out, and again, probably a function of undiagnosed ADHD or whatever. I not so much lose interest as gain a new obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, they're just like half cooked, or I just go, well, this is a great idea, but how do I work it out? Oh, look at this shiny thing over here.
So I do that too. I have a couple of those. What I've started doing as of late is when I come up with those half-cocked ideas, I will take and combine them. So say I have 3 or 4 high-level ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by high level, I'm talking like a sentence at most. John goes to the store and gets mugged. That's an entire story, right? You could tell an entire story around that prompt alone. So maybe I'll use, if I have 10 of those, I might use like 3 in a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe string them together. I've done it where I just grab 3 randomly, where it's like, I want to use this one, and then, oh, that one looks fun, and that one looks fun. And I always have to have a beginning, middle, and end. And I might not use those 3 prompts as the beginning, middle, and end, but I might use those 3 prompts. Like, I might use the first prompt as my beginning, and then the second prompt might be like towards the middle, but it's not going to be my direct middle point. My goal is to try and stretch that first prompt into the entire campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the one I feel strongest about, I want that to be the entire game. Those other two are going to be, either side content or just follies along the way to trip players up, filler basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of the long-term gaming stuff that is you need filler. And there's even, mid-term gaming stuff, like you're talking about sessions that run, say you run a half a year campaign, a 6-month session
Mm-hmm.
or 6-month campaign. There's going to be weeks where you're like, man, I really don't feel like putting the effort into the storyline. Well, that's when you grab one of those one sentence high level ideas and go, okay, well, we're going to do this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, see, like I think I hear what you're saying there, and for me, I think it's more I get even higher level ideas like that than that, I should say. Like, okay, I'll just throw this out there. I actually had kind of a combination of an idea I've had for a long time combined with some new inspiration for Night's Black Agents.
Mm-hmm.
And I was all set to start working on it. And then you're like, hey, I got this Night's Black Agents thing I'm almost ready to do. And I'm not trying to like call you out or anything because I know your flavor of it is going to be way different than mine.
Right.
But there's also just this element that where like, then I go, well, okay, so do I want to put all this effort into this right after someone else has run the same game? And, or like I have kind of a really neat kind of core idea for a mecha-based game, which I had thought of doing in Genesis because one of the things I want to do, I think would be really a lot easier to do in Genesis because you can hand wave some of the tech spec bits much
Right.
more than you can in say, not that I've looked at the system closely, but just knowing the designer, say Mecton Zeta.
Right.
Because Mike likes to stat everything out. And not
Yes.
that that's wrong. It's just for my concept, that's gonna create tons and tons and tons of paperwork.
Right.
So it comes to where like I'm going, well, I keep feeling like I don't know enough about the core system to bend it to what I need to do sometimes. And I know the solution to that is buckle down and read. But making me buckle down and read is
Yeah, I hate that answer. I absolutely hate that answer. How do I say this without pissing off a lot of people? Okay. An issue that some of the communities on the internet face, especially in the gaming space, is that when somebody comes with a question to a group, to a particular community, and goes, hey, how does this work? Or, I don't like this. How can I make this better? A lot of the time, the answer is, I don't know, read the book. Or somebody that does have the answer will come in the comments and go, yeah, it's here on this page in this section. Go read it. And that doesn't help anyone. Like it does, but that doesn't answer the question at hand. That is not a beneficial discourse. It is, I don't want to say gatekeeping because it's not. It's not a beneficial discourse. It's not a constructive way to help somebody understand something. If you have a question, you should be able to ask and say, hey, how does this work? And somebody should be able to come to you and go, well, if you do this, 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 and this, it does this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, well, you just need to buckle down and read it again.
No, yeah. And I think I do it to myself because there's some level of at times where I feel like, well, gee, I run an RPG podcast. I should know how to find this crap out on my own. And
remember back in the day, we used to say we're not experts.
yeah, we're not experts.
And
no, we're not.
we got in a fight over that, but I don't want to start that fight back up. But yeah, no, we're not experts. We're a couple of guys with some opinions.
Fair.
We have more experience than most, but there are also a ton of people in our Discord alone that have more experience than both of us.
Yeah.
We've talked to people, and I think I can't remember the quote, and I'm sure somebody can find it for me if they want. There's a quote along the lines of like understanding what you don't know is like true knowledge.
Okay.
It's that type of idea where it's basically the admission that you don't know something proves that you're smarter than someone who won't admit that they don't know something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know the concept. I'm not thinking of a specific quote, but I get the concept.
I'm sure there's a
completely.
bajillion of them, but it's that basic concept. And I find that, especially for myself, where I'm at in my gaming career, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. There's a lot of games that I've never heard of before. There's a lot of there's constantly new games coming out. There's constantly old games that I've never even realized existed. I didn't know the Dallas RPG existed until I discovered it that one time. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like until I heard somebody talk about it. It's you can't know everything about RPGs. It's just unknowable. There's some information that is just never going to be able to be like, no matter how much knowledge on it you have, you'll never have all of the information. And no matter what level you're at, reaching out and asking questions is not a terrible thing.
No, that's fair. And now I just glanced over and saw just a sliver of the corner of a book that I have and realized that might work for my idea, even though it wouldn't necessarily be mecha.
Hey,
which would lead me to reading a whole new dang book. But it's a pretty book.
Look, I found myself reading some books the other day. I was like, oh man, I'm going to read this and that, and ended up reading a couple new RPGs that I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But yeah, it's I get where you're coming from, where you're like, man, I should probably know this, but I don't. That doesn't embarrass me anymore. I used to be so embarrassed by that. I used to be like, oh, I should know this, but I don't know it, and I really need to just look it up myself. I don't want to ask, because asking would mean that somebody's going to be like, oh, you don't know this. And I used to get hung up on that stuff. I can't be bothered by it no more. I can't. I've just come to this. I came to this realization at some point that, like, man, if there's something I don't know, I'm just going to ask.
No, and you're completely right. And I like to think that I do that a lot, but I know I don't. You know, I get very self-conscious and self-critical a lot, and I'm sure that's a lot of where a lot of my hang-ups kind of are rooted, you know, where I just like, oh, well, but this. And so I end up making excuses and discouraging myself.
Yeah,
and
I understand. Trust me, I understand, because I'm a lot of the same way in certain aspects of certain things. And I'm a lot of the same way when it comes to, like, okay, perfect example of this. I'm very, like, as some of you know, I've talked about a little bit, my like side project that I'd like to get off the ground as my business is making soap and different cosmetic items, stuff like that. Wax melts, candles, all that fun stuff. I do that on the side. I'm trying to turn that into a business. I get very self-conscious about, like, because I did so much research and so much learning before I got into this that I completely understand where you're coming from when you say that you're, like, apprehensive to ask questions. I get it, because I'm that way with the soap stuff. I'm like, I should just know this. I shouldn't have to ask this question. But again, it goes back to that. There are no dumb questions.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I need to get something in gear, and like I know a lot of it is very much just kind of getting myself over that hump, but I struggle to push at it without either willfully or unwillingly getting myself distracted. And I think that's just me and my personality and the way, you know, certain parts of it are. And, you know, there's things that we all have to work on. So I don't know what that means, but I don't know. Like, I've been in this and well, you've seen me go through a lot of it, right? I want to do something, but I never seem to get quite far enough with it.
See, and for me, I see, so from an outside perspective, I hear you say that, and then here's what I see you do. You come up with an idea, you get it about 80% done. And the next step would be to just start playing the game. And you just don't make that step. You sort of give up. You're like, I'm not doing this.
See, it's interesting to hear you say that you see me at about 80%, because I feel like I'm at about 10 or 15%.
Yeah, but I've heard you've expressed to me ideas that you would say you're at like 10, 15%, where I'm like, oh, I'm sitting down at the table. I have my books ready and I have players to go at this table. Like, that is the crux of this game. We're going. And that's not I'm not slighting you, but it's just, that's where I think you're getting hung up, is that you feel like you need to do extra work for yourself. And I wonder if some of that is, and you can tell me I'm wrong, sometimes I feel like you get worried that you're going to run into questions you can't answer.
Oh, I'm sure that's part of it. I'm completely sure that's part of it.
I know for me, when I get to questions I can't answer, that's where I get excited. That's when I start getting excited about a game. When they start asking me stuff and I'm like, ooh, let me think about that. That's when I'm excited. That's when I'm having the most fun, because that lets me have the creative freedom to make up an answer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes that's where you're like, I've heard you talk about it and I'm like, well, why don't you just get it on a table? And you're like, well, but I'm not quite there yet. It kind of sounds like for me you are. It sounds like you're there. You're just telling yourself you're not there yet.
That you could be completely right in that regard. I don't have evidence to argue to the contrary. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to do this episode as like a big call out to you and being like,
no. I kind of asked for it. I mean, but I think
no, yeah, go ahead.
I can't be the only person who feels this way.
No, I'm gonna be completely honest. I felt that way for a long time until, and I don't want to say like that I gave up on caring, but I realized at a certain point, we're playing games to have fun. I don't need to take this as serious as I'm taking it.
Yeah, it was you realized you were caring too much.
Yes. Well, no, not so much caring too much, just taking it too seriously. Taking this whole hobby too seriously. Because at the end of the day, we're all sitting down to play pretend with each other and tell a goofy story. Even the best tabletop RPGs are goofy stories. And you could tell the most serious adventure possible, you're still going to have funny, goofy bits. It's just going to happen. That's the whole point of the table, sitting down and having fun together. And committing to what level of absurdity or goofiness you're willing to put up with that's when I start asking questions during like session 0 of like, what's the question I always ask? How serious do you want this game to be? That's usually how I word it. And that allows people the freedom to answer honestly. Whereas like I could be like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being dead serious and 10 being Monty Python, how, like, yeah, sure. But if I say to the group, how serious do you want to take this? And they go, I don't know, I want to have fun. All right, cool. That tells me that we can relax, we can breathe. And if a table comes back and goes, I'd like a pretty serious campaign, I'd like a really serious story. All right, cool. I need to be a little bit more strict. I need to be a little tighter. But at the same time, you can still have goofy fun and tell a serious game. Look at what I did with Mutant City Blues.
Yeah.
That was I built that in a way to be a serious game that had a lot of goofy fun. It had Eric licking shoes and like fights in old abandoned malls and like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
While it being serious, you still had ridiculous, goofy, silly moments. And understanding that 90% of RPGs are built to have those ridiculous, goofy, silly moments.
No,
Look
that's
at Morkborg. Morkborg is the perfect poster child for this. On the surface, that game is a deadly serious, super brutal, disgusting, gross, nasty fantasy RPG. At the table, That game is a hoot. That game is a riot. You laugh the entire time from the time you sit down to the time your character dies to the time your new character dies.
Yep.
It is a comedy of follies. And, that's a game that could be taken completely dead serious. Or play it the way it ends up being played. Take it seriously for however long you can take it seriously for, and then as soon as the absurdity starts to hit, let the absurdity happen. That's my thing. I think sometimes we need to take a step back and be like, it is a fun pastime to entertain ourselves, not something that has to be incredibly serious all of the time.
No, and I think you've hit on something that, in a roundabout way, if you want to call it a personality flaw for me, that I'm starting to realize and trying to figure out how to come to grips with, and that's that the short way to say it is I demand way too much perfection from myself. And in that, what I'm saying is, like, I'm trying in my mind, I need to, and I don't think this literally, but it's almost like I think I need to write the greatest campaign ever every time. And where this kind of has I started to realize this. I used to play guitar. You and I have talked about guitar, and I recently kind of got it back out and have been playing around with it and whatnot. And I realized that one of the hang-ups that I had years ago, and part of the reason I kind of got away from it was because I started doing the same thing again. Like, I try to learn a song and I'd worry that I don't get every note right, and not that I have the feel and the most of it right. And especially with rock and roll, look, it's the feel, it's the energy. It doesn't matter if you get every note right. And it's so much easier to say that and look and go, I know that's right, than it is to sit there when you're trying to play and go, oh, I messed that up. Oh, I messed that up.
Well, think about it.
And
Think about it this way. And you might have experienced this more than I have, but how many times have you been just having a fantastic time with a live band at a bar that's playing some terrible Leonard Skinner cover? The guitarist doesn't know the solos. The drummer is 5 beats per minute faster than he should be. The singer's 2 octaves higher than he needs to. But they are playing with every bit of their heart, and you are just having a great time.
yeah. Now, I can't speak 100% from personal experience, but guy I work with told me he saw Bachman Turner Overdrive live.
Yeah.
He said they are terrible, but it was a blast.
There's the Henry Rollins clip about Metallica. Like, the singer can't sing, the drummer can't drum. Like, it's this whole scathing. Hold on, I'll see if I can find it.
Well, no, I get what I don't know if I've ever seen that bit, but okay, let's talk about an example that you and I can both kind of relate to a little bit here. Van Halen, Van Hagar. David Lee Roth is not as good of a vocalist as Sammy Hagar. I don't think you'll find very many people ever who will argue that Dave is a better vocalist than Sammy. Dave is, and not that Sammy is a bad showman or a bad frontman, but Dave is by far a better entertainer frontman than Sammy, in my opinion. Sammy works a crowd great. He's very, very good. But especially when they were young, Dave just had that thing.
Right.
And I think, I don't know how that ties back to RPGs other than maybe, it's okay if you're Sammy Hagar and not David Lee Roth, or vice versa. Do what you're good at. Just, I need to convince myself of all that.
Yeah, and convincing yourself is
You cut out there.
Convincing yourself is the hard part.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Oh.
That was a round and round way to get to that, but I think that's where we needed to get to.
Yeah. Do you want to move into Game of the Week?
Sure. Game of the Week.
Game of the Week. Game of the Week.
So I have one, unless you want to start things off.
Either way, I've got one picked out too.
I have one that's all of $1.
Okay.
It is called Deadly New Year, and it's by Micro RPG. It's a micro player. It's all of 99 cents.
Uh-huh.
And basically you play, it's New Year's Eve 1985. You and your college friends are partying in a penthouse apartment, but a killer is on the loose hunting you with a vendetta. It's a super basic RPG. It has complete playable rule set, blah 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 blah. All of that's listed on their drive-through. It was just released right at the end of last year, December 31st, 2023. You need the rules, 2 20-sided die, 1 10-sided die, and a pencil and eraser. It looks pretty fun. I don't know. It looks fun to me, at least.
Well, I mean, look at the fun we had, and just, the episode dropped today as we're recording with War on Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
and there's nothing
admittedly,
to that.
We were terrible, but we had a blast.
Oh, well, you guys had some terrible rolls.
That, yeah.
I've never seen 6-sided die hate people more than it hated you guys.
But
yeah, that's why. Oh, my goodness. That's mine.
All right. Well,
What do you
I
guys?
found something, I don't know how new it is. It's actually a little over a year old, but I stumbled across it. It's a game called Eternus. I'll drop you a link in the green room. Just
Yeah, I'm trying to link
see
for
it.
mine.
Let me find, there it is. It is, I'm going to call it a space fantasy RPG, but as humankind has conquered the stars, we made our homes on endless worlds. Then we fell. At the peak of our understanding and mastery of the universe, we have lost our way and forgotten how we got there. So, in a way, probably some, not dissimilar, at least in base concept, to what the heck is the Big Monty Cook title? I'm having a brain fart.
Oh, Invisible Sun or whatever it's called.
No, not that one. I wanted, what the
Starts
crap?
without number.
No. It's Monty Cook. It's Cypher System, but it was like the first big one. I can't think of the name now.
Yeah, I don't. I'm drawing a blank. Somebody's yelling it. Somebody is yelling it at their phone.
Numenera.
That's it.
Yeah. So it at the surface, it probably has some crossover to Numenera, in that it's kind of post-apocalyptic space fantasy type thing, right?
Right.
But that's kind of, I think, where it ends, because it appears they're saying it's a time of brave paladins, powerful sorcerers, and follow the spoilers, dangerous alien beasts, blah 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 blah. It's built off a custom system that they say is inspired by like Forged in the Dark and Apocalypse Engine, but is its own simple 1d6 system. Says 10 archetypes and cast to choose from, etc. And so character creation's fast and simple. I don't know. It just looks interesting. It's currently marked down. I don't see it as being part of any sale. It's $6 for the PDF, and they also have a free quick start. So it's called Eternus, and it's from a company called the Black Orifice, which I've never heard of before. But yeah, it seems like it could be fun, and it's cheap, and they have a free quick start. So there's really no reason not to at least get the quick start.
Yeah, at the very least. Well, that is cool. Any final thoughts, Steve, before we wrap up for the night?
No, other than I hope that some of our rambling has maybe helped somebody out there maybe get over some of their hiccups and hang-ups and whatever, and I hope it helps me do the same. And, heck, come on over to the Discord if you haven't already, and we can talk about this stuff there and all help each other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and as always, links to everything we talked about are in the show notes. Discord, Patreon. We are fully listener supported. Going into 2024, we're looking to have, we don't have anything lined up yet, but we're looking into having some guests on. Expect our usual quality when it comes to guests. Bigger names, smaller names, independent artists, everything in between.
Yep.
And as always, we want to remind everyone to be kind to one another. Get out there and play some RPG.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
And I really hope you couldn't hear the dog crying the entire time.